Hi everyone. Sorry for the delay. We had some technical issues. Thanks for joining. We'll just give 1 more minute for everyone to settle down and then we'll get started. Okay. So good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're connecting from. To introduce myself, I'm Shashidhar, and I'm a part of Citrix Ready technical team. I hope everybody is doing good and keeping safe in this pandemic situation. I would like to welcome you all to this Citrix Ready technical webinar series where we showcase how Citrix and our partners have integrated to deliver the valuable products and solutions for the common problems faced by our customers today. I really appreciate your participation here. So today we will talk about how Tenzig has used the latest workspace app for Linux and leverage the latest features of Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktops. And we have Kevin from Tenzig along with us, who will walk through this shortly. Thanks, Kevin, for joining us today.
Thanks, Shashidhar.
Welcome. Okay, so before we jump on to the deeper discussions, I would like to let you know that this webinar is getting recorded and we will make this available on Citrix Ready YouTube channel later. There will be few poll questions in the middle and I would encourage you all to participate actively answering those. We'll also have a Q&A session at the end of this webinar wherein I and Kevin will take up the questions. So please feel free to post your questions in the chat window on the GoToWebinar. So with that said, let's jump on to the next slide and we'll talk about what Citrix Ready program is. So Citrix Ready program is an end-to-end technology partner program which helps software, hardware, and service companies develop and integrate their products with Citrix technologies. And we also help them verify their products' functionality in Citrix environments. So after these products are run through series of test scenarios, which we will see in the later slides, they get approved as Citrix Ready verified products and are listed on Citrix Ready Marketplace, wherein joint customers can quickly or easily find these solutions. So we have a lot of categories listed there, a lot of filters are there, which makes the navigation pretty easier. So please log into citrixready.citrix.com to see the Citrix Ready verified products. And also to have a detailed information about the program, you could navigate to citrix.com/partnerprograms/citrixready. So now we could see like, next slide, please, Kevin. Thanks. So today, I think we could say like this is the cloud era and Citrix Cloud services are there already in this cloud services, offering the different variant varieties of the services. We all talk about what is cloud, what is remote working, and majorly the security, isn't it? So Citrix has moved to this cloud technology a few years back, and now we are our entire workspace service portfolio is available in the form of Citrix Cloud services, and these are readily available to consume. In most cases, all you just need to do is to subscribe and activate them. The benefit to you is that the core infrastructure that you would typically have to install, manage, maintain, and upgrade your infrastructure is now managed for you as a service from Citrix Cloud. So our cloud transformation isn't just about making our independent products available as cloud services, but also we are unifying our products into an integrated portfolio of services that addresses the needs of today's hybrid and multi-cloud IT environments. So what that means for you is it's an easier and better way to provide any service to any user in a simple, fast, secure, and adaptable way. Next slide, please, Kevin. Thanks. So yeah, Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktops. Let it be on-prem or on the Virtual Apps and Desktop service on Citrix Cloud. This is one of the central components of the Citrix Workspace. So at its very core, if you think about centralizing your apps and desktops and then providing secure remote access from any device, this is the way to go. This enables you to embrace, bring your own device or low cost endpoints, empowering your employees to work from anywhere. And more importantly, it eliminates your IT headaches of PC management and patching. So please explore our Citrix Cloud services and get a feel of how easy it is to use these by navigating to citrix.cloud.com. We'll talk more about Citrix Cloud services and what all offerings we have and how beneficial it is for our partners and our customers in the coming slides. Thank you. So with the availability of the latest workspace app, which was earlier known as Citrix Receiver, our partners like our thin client vendors are now required to upgrade their product firmware and support Citrix Workspace app along with its new features to give customers the right digital workspace experience. So Citrix Ready Workspace Endpoint program, which we have created as a sub-program within Citrix Ready program, is exclusively for thin client vendors. So as I mentioned earlier, that the vendor product undergoes robust verification process. They are classified into two levels: Citrix Ready Standard level and Citrix Ready Premium level. And you could show these standard level and premium level. There you go. Yeah, so this is based on their capability to support Citrix virtual apps and desktop features. Like we have multiple scenarios which they have to undergo, and then they'll be classified into these two levels. So earlier we used to have three levels: HDX Ready, HDX Premium, and HDX 3D Pro. But now we have clubbed few test scenarios, and then based on the latest features, we have eliminated few and added few scenarios, and we have classified all these devices into two levels. So on Citrix Ready Marketplace, you could find these devices classified separately by using the appropriate filters. So let's see the test scenarios at a high level that are executed for a device to get qualified for these levels. So you could see on the right hand side, like we have Citrix Ready Endpoint, that's the standard device, and the Citrix Ready Endpoint Premium, that's the premium category device. There are a few optional test scenarios as well. And these are the test scenarios like 2D graphics, which will test the device's capability to support the 2D graphic applications. We have secure web and SaaS applications that needs to be verified whether they are supported or not. And we check all these mostly on the standard device. We check on the server rendering, like wherein we render the load on the server side. The media or flash redirection, everything happens on the server side. When it comes to the premium level, these are client rendered. So the load is on the client side, and if it is a pretty good, pretty decent performing thin client, it gets qualified for the premium level. So there are a few new test scenarios, like I was mentioning, like we do have HTML5 video redirection. The Skype for Business optimization pack is still up there. We have the latest optimization done for the Teams as well. So we will talk about this in detail shortly. Next slide, please. Yeah, so in the HTX integrations, what we have done, the browser content redirection is the most talked about these days. So that's one of the test scenarios which will be a qualification for the premium device. There are 3D test scenarios as well, like you could see in the peripherals, and then HDX graphics, wherein we check the capability of the device supporting these 3D applications. So these are still rendered on the server. The entire load is not on the client or the endpoint. So this we still consider under the Citrix Ready endpoint, the standard level. So the other one, the last, if you could see the H.265 decoding for graphics, we have still kept it as optional, and that's in the premium level. But soon, I think most of the devices are getting up to that level wherein they'll support this H.265 coding. So hopefully we'll make it as a mandate test scenario also for the premium device. So with that said, let me post a poll question for you. And then there you go. So are you planning to deploy Citrix Cloud or Citrix Virtual Apps or Desktops in your infrastructure? So you could select one of these, Citrix Cloud, Virtual Apps, or Virtual Desktops, or you may have already deployed it, or you're still planning for it, maybe. Okay, I'll just give another 5 seconds, and then I'll close the poll. Yeah, good to see that. Yeah, 35 to 40% have already deployed it, and 58% saying maybe, and few are already using Citrix Cloud and Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktops as well. Okay, so with that said, I'll hand it over to Kevin. Kevin, the mic is all yours.
Thanks, Shashidhar, and hi everybody. And just to sort of back up what Shashidhar mentioned, really appreciate everybody's attendance here today, and hope you're all keeping safe during these crazy times. So a quick background on Tenzig. We're solely focused as a thin and zero client vendor, and we're specialized in Citrix amongst other VDI and EUC products. Our company motto is that we make our product fit your environment and not the other way around. And this is more critical than ever in such fast-paced and changing times. Our headquarters are in Phoenix, Arizona, with offices in UK, Australia, and Germany. But like any business at the moment, a lot of us are working from home, and we work with value-added partners and distributors in EMEA and North America. We've been in business for 17 years, and we originated in the IBM terminal emulation market before rebranding as Tenzig in 2009, where our sole focus became VDI and server-based computing. We work closely with Citrix, as Shashidhar has mentioned, and are a founding Citrix Ready partner, which as we saw, means that we certify all of our endpoints on the Citrix Ready marketplace. And this is an exceptional program, as Shashidhar highlighted, which allows Citrix partners to certify their hardware and software and give Citrix customers and partners the assurance in selecting the compatible products. So where we're able to differ from our competitors is that we're solely focused, and our staff through sales and technical are skilled in Citrix. And as mentioned, we're the front runner in many Citrix innovations, which included the recently introduced Citrix Ready Workspace Endpoint program, as well as being certified on our zero and thin clients for Skype for Business, and now as we're seeing with Microsoft Teams optimization as well. Very quickly, just to discuss our Citrix Ready endpoints, we have a range of zero clients plus thin clients based on both Linux and Windows 10 IoT. All our endpoints are Intel and AMD based, and as you can see, include a wide array of hardware options, such as varying display connectivity, USB-C, fiber, and PoE. All Tenzig endpoints include enterprise-free centralized management via the Tenzig Manager, and we already have a range of Teams optimized Citrix Ready endpoints, one of which is the hardware which we're premiering today, the 6010Q. We also offer a flexible demo program for anybody wanting to trial our products in your Citrix environment. And again, there'll be a poll later on for anybody who wishes to take up that demo program. So it's worthy to point out the relevance of thin and zero clients for cloud computing, which is always growing at an ever fast pace. But I think clearly we've seen another change of that this year, with again what we're seeing with this global pandemic situation. So we're for sure seeing a shift in demand now to office and home office usage. And an early trend we saw at the beginning of the pandemic was with work from home was an increased demand for mobile endpoints, including laptops. However, what we've seen in terms of feedback is these often lack the deployment and ongoing management features that are standard in a thin or zero client. And similarly, whilst a laptop is ideal for working from temporary locations such as kitchens, dining rooms, and if you're the type of parent that has to work from the shared room where the children are doing their sort of homeschooling, then you can probably sympathize with how difficult that is. So the thin or zero client it aesthetically fits better to a home office permitting the same level of operation and functionality that you get in the traditional office. And of course, it conforms with health and safety measures with working from a desk, etc. Again, either from a home office or similar to what you would expect in a traditional office environment. Similarly, security, as Shashidar again touched on, is an ever-increasing concern. And with Citrix Cloud comes zero trust security with users of BYOD type devices. So zero and thin clients, as previously mentioned, continue to be centrally managed and meet security audits, giving enterprises assurance that the endpoints they use at remote, unsecured locations have the same level of security as they do in the workplace. Automated configuration and remote management is ever more essential, and this is made possible using the ZIG Manager, where we can automate configuration and facilitate remote management to both office and home-based endpoints without compromise. And as we'll uncover later, unified communication and collaboration tools make up an extensive percentage of deployments. As we've seen, probably 60% of our deployments combine Citrix with some sort of UC. And similarly for various verticals, the wide array of USB peripherals in demand require a high level of support and compatibility, which is part of our ongoing development and partnership with various vendors, including for healthcare, legal, federal sectors, amongst others. And finally, power consumption. This was ever important several years ago in reducing carbon footprint within business and within enterprises as a result of using thin or zero clients versus traditional desktops. And this remains the case now, and again extends to home workers who are now either finding themselves responsible for electricity from home, or even have concessions from their employers who contribute towards this. So again, all these historic points around thin and zero clients are even more prominent today. So I'm now pleased to announce the latest hardware and software to the ZIG range. So the ZIG 6048 QC is our new hardware, which features an Intel J4105 quad-core CPU with burst capability to 2.5 gigahertz and high-speed DDR4 RAM. And this is ever important in offloading tasks that we'll see later with features such as the Teams optimization and browser content redirection. This hardware supports not only 4K, but dual DisplayPort 4K at 60 Hz, and is, I'm pleased to confirm, already Citrix Endpoint Premium verified. And in addition to the 6048 QC, most recent hardware to come into our range is amongst the first to feature our all-new 64-bit Linux operating system. So this is a project that is some 1 to 2 years in development, and the theme behind is not just to support the latest hardware available, but also improve on what we had previously by leveraging the 15 plus years of experience in this field. And some of the challenges that we've faced previously include development time in terms of reducing time as much as possible, again with how fast-paced the VDI and cloud computing market is evolving. Our legacy OSs have a wealth of libraries which we've had to maintain for many years to maintain, again, the legacy support, but we've finally reached a point in time where we can leverage the best of new. So we wanted to align ourselves as closely to our partners when it comes to new releases and enhancements without having to reinvent the wheel by injecting and customizing libraries and dependencies, which again take time in development as well as ongoing support. And finally, security and vulnerability threats, as we've talked about today, are ever important and on the increase. So what can we do to improve on this? The first thing that was paramount in our vision was better aligning ourselves as close to a standardized Ubuntu build as possible, since this always is a common denominator for Linux-based clients such as the Citrix Workspace App. And the result of this is all about, again, saving time, both in terms of initial integration and development, but also the reduction in the number of packages and dependencies that we have to customize in order to be able to support those features that Shashidhar touched on in the earlier slides. So NOS 32, which is the predecessor before, is our zero client type architecture for Citrix, and no doubt that's been a great success. So, and that was down to the fact that it includes a finely tuned Linux architecture for supporting the Workspace app and receiver before it, and coupled with our Launchpad and configuration apps and management agents, we wanted to maintain this approach for NOS 64. So this provides users with a zero client style user interface with simple and clean method of authenticating and connecting into Citrix, as well as providing a rigid and secure platform which can be deployed and managed using the ZIG Manager. So with that, we present NOS 64, which is derived from a core Ubuntu 18.04.2 LTS, and LTS is short for the long-term support build. And this includes things like a Linux 5.00 kernel with built-in packages, including Debian Buster Stable packages, with minimum root FS providing only files necessary for an early boot, and existing packages which can be installed and initialized during late boot. So we also include then the same front-end architecture which made NOS 32 so popular, again with the things that I talked about, in addition to retaining that secure platform to be centrally managed via the ZIG Manager. This also includes our H.264 hardware decoder for Citrix to support the full screen video codec, or as it's known, the Citrix High Definition User Experience, as well as improved support for high DPI displays, and most importantly, a small memory and storage footprint as possible in order to maximize the endpoint performance and boot speed. And with that, we've also coupled that with introducing some key changes which we've recognized as a change in demand, not necessarily just now, but for the future with what Citrix Workspace and Cloud brings. And I'll cover that in more detail on the next slide. So the first formal firmware, which is 16.1.20, is included by default, again on the 6048QC and the other hardware that's listed on this particular slide. And it's also shortly available on request for our other ZIG hardware in warranty. So for those who subscribe to our tech and firmware notification, this notification will be released very shortly. And in addition, we've also added recently the self-service connection or connectivity option, which again I'll be providing a demonstration on, and this will be then available in the next release as essentially an experimental feature. So I think it's important to talk here about, again, what we've done to embrace Citrix Workspace and Citrix Cloud, because for sure it promotes a new way of working, and from our perspective, how we consume the workspace from the endpoint. So as we see it historically with VDI, the Windows OS and the Windows desktop was a user's workspace for consuming apps, email and all of the user's activities, calendar, appointments, meetings, etc. And a great deal of analysis has been done by Citrix in terms of studying the time spent by average employees for searching for files and resources required to conduct their work. And statistics come back to state that as much as 25% of an employee's work time is spent essentially finding those resources. So Citrix Workspace is designed to put this information, as well as those same apps used to consume them, at the forefront of the user, and better still, have them appear based on the time, date, and location and other factors. And again, these are all features that that are being introduced over time, but we recognize that there's definitely a clear trend and a transition towards that sort of model. So in addition, those apps are also now extended to not just support the traditional published on-premise apps, but also SaaS apps, web apps, and even micro apps, all to be consumed via Citrix Workspace, as opposed to under the hood of a Windows desktop. So whilst we recognize the reality is the Windows desktop and OS is here to stay for the foreseeable future, we want to embrace Citrix Workspace to allow users to access their resources locally at the endpoint, including those previously mentioned, such as apps and activity, etc. So this means we have to give the user more local control of those resources within the endpoint. And to this extent, we've integrated an all-new window manager plus a sidebar or taskbar, which gives greater flexibility and control for users who are consuming the apps and resources locally via the Citrix Workspace app. So just to summarize, the 10ZIG endpoint is the optimal device for Citrix Workspace because Citrix Ready Approval gives you, the users, the assurance it meets the requirements of Citrix Workspace. It supports the wide array of HDX feature set available from Citrix, some of which we'll be exploring next. And the endpoint is optimized exclusively for Citrix Workspace and can be centrally managed, making it ideal for both home and office locations. This slide is just to touch on the latest innovations with the Citrix Workspace app for Linux in terms of keeping track with these most recent demands. So the April 2004 release saw significant features, including some improvements to log on and enumeration of resources for cloud-based deployments. Additionally, it was the first to introduce a level of optimization for Microsoft Teams, so it featured audio optimization at the endpoint. And finally, the NetScaler app experience sources via the NSAP virtual channel to gather HDX insight data, which improves scalability and performance. In the forthcoming Citrix Workspace app for Linux 2006 version, which is available very soon and available now as an early access release to subscribers of the EAR program, in addition to audio optimization, this now also includes video and screen sharing optimization for Microsoft Teams from Linux-based endpoints. So we invite mutual customers to request this for trial and feedback. And again, assuming that the demo works as well as it did in the earlier test, I should be able to demonstrate this feature during the webinar today. So both of these Workspace app versions are available with the 10ZIG NOS 64 operating system. So Teams optimization. So again, we've discussed this a number of times already throughout the webinar. This is a joint Microsoft and Citrix innovation to redirect audio, video, and screen sharing via the endpoint when using the Teams desktop application in conjunction with Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktops. And this optimization reduces latency and server-side overhead, improving user experience in hair type scenarios, which otherwise create a forwarding scenario between the endpoint and the virtual apps or desktops. The Skype for Business optimization pack before it was hugely popular for Citrix, where a substantial number of enterprises from all verticals embraced the two things. So with a shift now in demand towards Microsoft Teams and an even bigger shift towards remote working, we're really excited as to see what happens with regards to the Teams optimization for both existing and new deployments. Last month, some of you may have actually joined that webinar. We did do a joint webinar with Citrix with essentially a deep dive into Teams optimization, and that is available on the 10ZIG YouTube channel. So I do encourage you, if you want to get a deeper dive onto that, to encourage you to watch that viewing. And again, in respect to the versions supporting Teams optimization, they're listed here for your info. So browser content redirection, or specifically the CF or Chromium embedded framework, is another heavily sought after HDX feature which has evolved and improved in recent times. So incarnated out of HDX flash redirection before it, this technique is a way of redirecting the browser viewport, which runs on the virtual delivery agent, again, either on the desktop or the app, towards the endpoint. So the user navigates to a site using their Chrome or Internet Explorer browser, and the URL request is redirected to the endpoint, where the endpoint will directly fetch and render the content using its own local browser engine. And this content is overlaid in the virtual desktop or app, giving the user the appearance that this is all occurring within the native browser. So similar to the Teams optimization, this technique reduces server-side overhead and bandwidth consumption, since the endpoint fetches and renders this directly, at the same time improving user experience to be desktop-like performance. So earlier versions leverage a browser engine in Linux endpoints using WebKit GTK+, but this resulted in performance issues on lower powered endpoints. So recent versions of Citrix Workspace App for Linux from 1912 onwards feature Chromium-based browser engine, which still today is classed as an experimental feature. However, the customer feedback and results are looking really positive with regards to performance gains. And again, I'm happy to announce that this same feature is enabled by default in the NOS 64 platform. So we come on to a demonstration now, and this is going to consist of setting up the 6048 QC and the NOS 64 platform, and we'll also get to look at the self-service connection option to connect into Citrix Cloud, as well as providing a demo on Teams and browser content redirection. And Shashidar, I probably realized that I've shot through those poll questions that we'd agreed beforehand we were going to shoot. So I don't know if for now, I see I don't know if now you want to put in the potentially the one that we agreed to do here, whilst I get this demo started. Thanks.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so the poll question is, which of these have you configured in your setup as of now? Microsoft Teams and browser content redirection. You could choose only MS Teams, only BCR, both, or none. Okay, see. Okay, let me close the poll. Okay, I'll give 5 more seconds. I could see still if you are voting here. Yeah, so 18% say Microsoft Teams, 13% only BCR, 13% say both, and 57% say none.
Interesting. So still quite a lot of optimization to occur. Let's hope we can convince during this demonstration. So yeah, so the first bit I'm going to demonstrate during the webinar is just the setup. So as I always do on these demos, it's important to say that the 10-zig manager can automate this, but it's always good to see how simple it is just from an unboxing point of view. So the first step is specifying the country, which specifies the keyboard language of the endpoint, as well as, for example, if we're in the US, it would also allow us to specify the time zone. So just going to put in the time and date. And again, I apologize that we're running late due to those earlier technical issues, but hopefully we can catch up some of that time. And then the third and final step is specifying our connection type to Citrix. Now, this particular client, I'm just going to connect for the sole purpose of connecting to provide a Teams optimization demo, which I'll come back to later. So assuming my sausage fingers are working correctly or not working correctly, whatever the right answer is. Let's get that in. I'm just going to configure a couple of other options that are necessary for the purpose of the demo when we get back to it. Okay, I get a certificate warning here with the fact I haven't yet imported the certificate, so I'm just going to accept that certificate warning for now, and then I'm just going to enter into the control panel to turn the SSH client on so that I can demonstrate the load on the endpoint when we come back later to do the Teams optimization demonstration. So that's how simple it is. It's just 3 simple steps. And again, if you have the TenZig manager, then it works by detecting any unconfigured endpoint by group location and pushes out the configuration template. So really, really simple and straightforward, and a zero client type user interface for users. So I'm going to switch away from that one for now. We'll come back to that later. And we're going to turn to this second one, which is my endpoint, which is configured to Citrix Cloud. Now, before we connect to that, I just want to take you through a few common options so that you can get a better feel for things. So if I go into the control panel, I'm required to put in a password. And again, this is all very simple stuff. We can lock down the control panel using a password. We can enable user-based options. So for example, if you want to continue to allow your users to, for example, change their preferred USB audio device, you can do that here. If you want them also to change their display layout or their display resolution, you can allow them to do that, as well as Wi-Fi, etc. So there's certain user-based options that you can allow the user to configure themselves, but then hide the remainder of the control panel here. So in Citrix Workspace, we now have this additional self-service option, which uses the native browser within Citrix Workspace app, as opposed to the historical 3 connection types that we use to connect to, again, either Citrix Storefront, Citrix NetScaler, or Citrix Cloud as well. So yeah, this is just to demonstrate the self-service, and in conjunction with the self-service connection, we then have some options to change the user experience. So when we open the self-service user interface, do we open it in windowed or full screen mode? If we connect to our desktops, do we open those in full screen or windowed mode? So common options to allow us to interact differently with the Citrix Workspace app. As I mentioned during the slides, we've also added the ability of a local sidebar and taskbar, which historically we never had because this platform was designed to be a zero client for VDI. It was all about authenticating into Citrix and launching a Windows-based desktop, whereas again now we're seeing a shift back towards apps. So this is very simple. We can turn it on. We have either a minimal or a full view of the taskbar, and we can position it either left, right, top, or bottom, as well as configuring options like auto hide, show the application icons and text, as well as tooltips. So I'll just turn it on, click OK, and now we can see the sidebar taskbar has come into view. So that's a quick guide through that. If we then attempt to log into Citrix Cloud, connections always seem slower when you're running a webinar. So here now we see the theme of Citrix Workspace app, where we've got a combination of our apps and desktops. And again, if we're using a combination of apps, again, whether they be published apps or web apps or SaaS apps, they are, the whole point of Workspace is that they are published within the Workspace app, and they're seamless to the user in terms of them, again, being traditional published apps or web apps, etc. But as you can see, they position themselves on the sidebar and the taskbar, so it becomes much more about the user interacting locally with the endpoint as opposed to locally with the Windows-based desktop. Now if I connect to this Windows 2019 server, should be able to give a demonstration of the browser content redirection. So whilst we're waiting for that desktop to launch, let me, so it's still connected. So I'm just connected to this endpoint through SSH, and I'm just running the Linux top command so that we can look at the CPU and the RAM, the memory load of the endpoint. And you can see that, so the CPU load is around about 3%, between 2 and 3% at the moment. So it's really doing nothing. That's made up of the WFICA, which is the Workspace app or receiver before it, and the WebKit process, which was that web engine used to display the Citrix Workspace. So if we go in and we open Google Chrome on this virtual desktop, first of all, just want you to observe this particular icon here. So this is the Citrix browser redirection extension that is added from the Chrome Web Store. Didn't want that one. So if you go to the Chrome Web Store, you can then go in and you can search for the browser redirection extension. Now, as it is now, this is gray. So this means that the browser redirection extension is idle and inactive. So for example, if we go to something like the famous Daily Mail news feed site in the UK, this is a site that isn't redirected to the endpoint. And if I look at Task Manager here on the virtual desktop, and again, bearing in mind that this is running in the cloud, so it's compute power that we're paying for based on usage. So as it stands at the moment, you can see that Chrome is using up a fair amount of CPU load on the virtual desktop. And again, if we summarize that in the CPU count here, very, very heavy usage. And this is a well-known famous website that contains, as you can see, a mixture of video, text, and graphics. And again, if we just switch the SSH back into view, the endpoints running roughly around 12-13%, which again is mostly made up in terms of the display being decoded to the endpoint through the WFICA real process and the graphics processing within Zorg. So if we then, let's go now to YouTube. And as you can see now, by going to youtube.com, the web browser extension has become active. And again, if we now compare that, you can see a very quick shift with CPU activity from high to low on the VDA. And even if I start playing this video here, again, the CPU activity on the VDA remains low. And again, this is ever important on a cloud-based desktop where you're paying for this compute power. And again, if we now shift towards the SSH, the endpoint, we can see that the endpoint is using more than it was before. So it's roughly around 40% in terms of fetching and rendering that content from youtube.com. And you can see that's the web container process here. So again, that's ever important for both cloud-based desktops and also bandwidth, with the fact that the endpoints are probably going to be remote from the cloud-based desktop. So if they can fetch and render that content directly from, in this case, YouTube, that makes up a ton of savings. Now, there is a few policies that are required for web content redirection, and I'll cover those after we've done the Teams demo. So we'll leave that there for now. And in fact, we'll close that one out as well for now. So now what I'm going to do is come back to this other endpoint, which again is connected to my on-prem environment. And I'm going to use this to connect to my Windows 10 desktop in order that I can demonstrate Teams. And as you can see, that flashes up the beta or beta sign because we're running the 2006 early access release, which again should be available very soon. So that will just take a sec for Teams to start up as well. So in the meantime, let's connect over to that particular endpoint. Again, run top. And again, we can see at the moment the load on the endpoint is low. Now we saw briefly there the HDX Teams process. So that's the process that's responsible for in this version, the audio, the video, and the screen sharing. Now, when I open Teams, if I go to About and Version, just like we saw in the previous webinar that was based on the Windows-based endpoints, you can see the version of Teams and the fact that it's working as Citrix HDX optimized. So this means that the virtual channel is running, and it's allowing me that if I go to Settings and Devices, that I can choose the headsets and webcams that are locally attached. So this is a unit that's just running in my office at the moment and talking directly to the endpoint. Now again, if we turn back to SSH again, we can see that the CPU or HDX Teams, it's there, but it's still very minimal, just because all it's doing is that test video image. But if I go, let's make a test call to myself from my home location. Make sure I've not put myself in DND at home.
Kevin, I think we lost your audio.
Am I back now, Shashidar?
Yes.
Yeah, so fortunately I might have lost the audio during that call, but hopefully you saw that Teams as process within the virtual desktop was 0, and in the SSH in the endpoint we were sat around 40%, where all of the video, the audio, and if I had demonstrated screen sharing would have been positioned towards the endpoint. So that kind of summarizes the demonstration. Let me just very quickly show you those policies that I mentioned before with regards to browser content redirection and Teams, and then we'll hand over to some Q&A. And it looks like we managed to catch up on time as well, Shashidar.
Yeah, absolutely, Kevin. We're right on time.
Okay, so just to cover those policies that are applicable to both Teams and browser content redirection, I'll just go ahead and create a new policy. It's normally easier to show that. So for Teams, it's very straightforward, and it's actually enabled by default. So there's just one policy, which is the Microsoft Teams redirection. So that should be as configured by default, set to allowed. There are obviously also other minimum requirements which are covered in the guides, which again are either in that webinar recording that I referred to earlier, or available on Citrix. For the browser content redirection, there's actually 5 different policies. So firstly, there's the browser content redirection, which again has to be allowed in order to use this. There's also then the browser content redirection ACL configuration, or as I kind of relate to it more, the whitelist. So this is, as you saw when I went to youtube.com, this then activated the browser content redirection. So you need to put in any websites into this list that are redirected to the endpoint. And as you can see, this can include wildcards. Now, in addition, if the site supports authentication. So if, for example, you go to the site and you get redirected towards an authentication site, then again, it supports this as well. So you can put those authentication sites into this whitelist. And then we also have a blacklist. So the blacklist is there to effectively, well, firstly, disable browser content redirection, but also override anything that you specify within the ACL configuration list. So again, the same sort of syntax, but it's just a blacklist as opposed to a whitelist. And then finally, you have the browser content redirects proxy configuration. So this is where if you want to specify a proxy server in the location of your VDA, that this can facilitate both connection through a proxy, but also where the content is server fetched and then client rendered, as opposed to the model that I demonstrated, where the client both fetches and renders the content directly from, in that case, youtube.com. So that concludes the demonstration. Apart from that little glitch with the audio, which I apologize for, hopefully everything else came across well. And I think that now takes us towards the Q&As, Shashidhar.
Yes, thanks, Kevin, for walking us through the slides and a pretty neat demo. So yeah, we have a few questions from the audience. Let me just pull this up. Okay, so the first one is, we plan to move to Citrix Workspace or Cloud later. Can we use these same endpoints for internal Citrix storefront on-prem connections?
Yes, the answer to that question is yes. So as you probably saw during the demo, we have multiple different connection types to Citrix, and in addition, you can also specify in that platform multiple URLs. So we have some customers who are testing, say, Citrix Cloud and on-premises in parallel. So you can essentially choose to connect to one or other URL. So yeah, the answer to that question is yes.
Thank you. Yeah, the next one is, over internet through Citrix Cloud Gateway, shall I use Microsoft Teams audio and video call on 10 ZIG thin client and 0 clients?
Sorry, just repeat that question again, Shashidhar.
Yeah, over internet through Citrix Cloud Gateway, shall I use Micro Teams audio and video call on 10 ZIG thin client and 0 clients?
Yeah, I think again, generally that would be the recommended approach because of the fact that the audio and the video is directed from the endpoint directly to the Teams cloud services, so they're not having to hairpin firstly to the cloud-based desktop and then over to the Teams cloud services. So yes.
Okay, yeah. Makes sense. Thank you. The next one is, we want to be able to manage Citrix endpoints over the internet. Is this possible?
Yes, it is possible. So we released an additional feature of the 10 ZIG Manager, which again is inclusive and completely free of charge. It's our cloud enablement feature. So we call it the cloud connector, and it can either be installed on the same virtual machine as the 10 ZIG Manager or a separate machine, for example, in the DMZ. And this can be used to manage and configure 10 ZIG endpoints through the internet the same way they would in a normal LAN or WAN situation. And quite recently, we've extended this to Windows-based 10 ZIG endpoints as well. So we can manage both 10 ZIG Linux, 0, and Windows endpoints over the internet, which again, given the current state, is really powerful.
Okay, yeah, thanks. Now, the next one is on Teams. Which model would you recommend for Teams video calls?
I definitely recommend a device in either in the region of the 6048 QC that we demonstrated on, or something like the 5848 QC model. The reason is that the video encoding that's required, and as you touched on in the Citrix Ready slides, Shashidhar, the requirements to encode video calls above 360p or higher requires quite a powerful endpoint. So whilst you can do the Teams optimization across the board, in order to get up to the sort of 720p standard for video, something like the 5848 QC or the 6048 QC, I would personally recommend for Teams optimization.
Yeah, I think in addition to that, Kevin, one could also navigate to Citrix Ready Marketplace. You can search for the device, and you have the filters wherein you can select Teams optimized device, and then you will get the list of devices as well. So I think 10 ZIG would be at the top there for sure.
Yeah, I agree.
Great. So yeah, the next one follows. How long does it typically take 10 ZIG to implement the latest features or releases from Citrix?
Yeah, it's a really good question. We've always been typically faster than our competitors, but hopefully with the 64-bit platform, as I mentioned, we're actually much faster. So with as an example, with the Teams optimization, we've had those available really within a matter of days or week. Now, that's available on request or is initial tests, and to then get them into effectively our general availability firmware, that time period can be anywhere from 1 month to 3 months, dependent on our release cycles. So to summarize, we have our GA firmware, which includes essentially the current version of Workspace app as it is at the time, but then we have private firmware or add-ons that customers can request on demand that feature the very latest version or even early access release versions of Citrix Workspace app, like the 2006 version I mentioned before during the webinar.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Yeah, so we do have a few more questions listed, but considering the time, we may not be able to take them now. But we'll definitely follow up on that, and then we'll reach out to you, whoever asked these questions. So before we do this webinar, Kevin, do you have any final words for our audience today?
I'd just like to again, thank everybody for taking their time. I think it was interesting to see during the polls that surprisingly there aren't as many users as I was expecting using those HDX features. So Citrix is the best with regards to HDX to be able to leverage the best performance. So I'd really encourage those out there who haven't already trialed those features to test them. And I think we were also going to do a poll at the end to again invite anybody that was interested to take a demo. So whether you want to do that as a final poll, Shashidhar, and then I think we can end the webinar from there.
Yes, sure. Yes, so I have put the poll question here. So would you like to receive a 10 ZIG demo device to test in your own environment? Okay, yeah, I see a pretty good response. I see about like 60-70% say yes, and then yeah, 20-30% are saying later.
Yeah, that's great. So we can follow up with any of those as needed afterwards. So that's great. And yeah, just before we go, there's a final question on the recording of the webinar. So Shashidhar, if you can, I guess that's for you to handle in terms of how that's, I think you said at the beginning that will go up on youtube.com.
Yes. So we are recording this webinar, and we will be posting this on our Citrix Ready YouTube channel maybe in a couple of days.
Perfect.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, thanks a lot for your time, Shashidhar.
Yeah, thanks again, Kevin. It was wonderful on this webinar having you and then walking through these slides. And I would like to thank all the audience here as well who have taken the time and then attended this webinar. Stay safe, stay home, I would say. And with this, we will conclude this webinar. Thank you. Have a wonderful day ahead.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Shashidhar.